more than 800,000 streams per month to make equivalent of $15 an hour. The Living Wage for Musicians Act would change that by creating a new fund that aims to pay artists at least 1 penny per stream.
It's time, baby.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Are you ready to splurge off that penny?
DIY.
DIYers, over the last few weeks, there have been a lot of conversations about the fair or unfair distribution of payouts of money from these streaming companies. It has gone as high as Congress, where there is a bill that was proposed by Representative Rashida Tlaib, who says that she may have a solution for the unfair ways that artists are paid via music streaming. Let's start off with this video and see what she means and dive a little deeper.
Mr. Speaker, I'm from Motown, where our music has changed the world in so many incredible ways forever. But artists in my district and across our country are struggling to make ends meet in an industry where the money just keeps going to executives and shareholders. It would take more than 800,000 streams per month to make equivalent of $15 an hour.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Like, we know this. We know how little it is, but to hear, it's just I always think it's hilarious when we hear the comparisons of what kind of output is expected in order to get.
The vast majority of our artists are on platforms like Apple Music, Spotify. And one of the things that even for them, they never ever get to 800,000 streams in a year.
The people who seem to want to combat this idea of it's only this amount of streams, I think they're not understanding that it is 800,000 streams per month. Not your one. I see people now who brag about 800,000 streams, and I'm like, bro, it's not the flex you think it is. They brag about 800,000 streams one time. You understand month by month the kind of infrastructure, the kind of traffic that you have to generate, the kind of output that you'd have to do?
This is a big deal. Streaming now represents 84% of recorded music industry's revenue in the United States. But most of the artists who bring joy to our lives and culture aren't seeing any of it. The Living Wage for Musicians Act, which I introduced with Representative Bowman, would change that by creating a new fund that aims to pay artists at least 1 penny per stream.
You ready to splurge? It's time, baby.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
Are you ready to splurge off that penny? I'm not.
The bill will completely reform the music industry, supporting much more diverse set of artists, enabling more recording and touring, and sending a ripple effect throughout local economies by supporting professionals throughout the music industry. I truly encourage my colleagues to learn more about this, co-sponsor the bill, and help change artists' lives forever.
You know, you gotta give props where props are due, because I was told that the people don't care about that. I was told that people ain't buying on me. Man, people don't care what artists making and I was told people don't care. How the hell did it get to Congress? Interesting. The Hollywood Reporter gave a little bit more information about this proposed bill. They said congressional representatives Rashida Tlaib and also, cannot forget, Jamal Bowman introduced the proposed Living Wage for Musicians Act on Thursday, aimed at increasing streaming royalties for musicians online. The resolution, created in partnership with the United Musicians and Allied Workers Union, calls for economic justice and fairness in streaming. The act would create a new streaming royalty with the aim to compensate artists and musicians more fairly at a penny per stream. Oh, bless their heart. The report goes on to say that streaming has grown to represent 84% of recorded music industry's revenue. 84%. Oh, boy. But that Spotify, the leading music streaming platform, only pays an average per stream royalty of 0.003, meaning artists must reach 800,000 monthly streams to equal a full-time $15 per hour job. The proposed new royalty would be paid in addition to existing royalties, ensuring that artists receive at least 1 cent per stream, with an eventual cap on the amount of possible profit per month. Interesting. The additional payments will be funded via a tax on the streaming platform's non-subscription revenue and a small increase to the cost of music streaming subscriptions. Interesting. So I agree that this is a step in the right direction. They're trying to do what they can to add more pressure to these platforms. My first initial reaction when seeing this was that, ain't got shit to do with me. I'm off these streaming ones. No, I'm playing. The first reaction I had when I saw this really focused around what will the ripple effect be for these platforms that are already fighting to not even give you the fraction. My concern was, what kind of crazy behavior would this inspire if they do get this pressure from the government? And right on time, Daniel Ek says the music industry is like professional football. He said this in response to why do artists get paid so little through streaming. Now, I found the original article where he said all this stuff a week ago, but there was also an opinion article on this same website of musictech.com that goes more into detail about why this weird ass analogy just further alienates this gentleman and his punk ass platform from artists in general. They're so tone deaf, it is insane. The subheadline reads, Spotify paid out over $9 billion to the music industry in 2023, but its CEO seems to continuously distance himself from the musicians who work his business depends on. Let's not forget that. This whole platform depends on the people they pay the least. The person who wrote this article, what's the name? Sam Willings, says, I'm sure Daniel Ek has a better grasp on the inner workings of the music industry than I do. The Spotify CEO probably has an immense access to listener statistics and data, some of which you don't get, and a deeper understanding of the company's royalties and revenue systems than most. But his apparent inability to empathize with artists of all levels is on frequent display, and his input to the music industry's discourse is often perceived by musicians as tone deaf. Ek's latest gaffe came last week in the form of a selfie video posted to social media. In it, he boasted that Spotify paid out more than $9 billion to the music industry in 2023, and then compared the music industry to professional sports. You know how much I hate that analogy, no matter what analogy it is, because we're talking about art, by the way. Let's see what he got to say.
Hey everyone, so about a week ago, Spotify announced that we've now paid out more than $9 billion to the music industry in 2023. And that in the entire history of Spotify, we've now paid out more than $48 billion. The reason why I'm doing this video
He for sure ain't reading, right?
is I'm getting a lot of questions around artist payouts. Spotify does not pay out to artists individually. So when we pay out, we do pay out to record companies, to publishers, and to collecting societies. Which means that sometimes when I see these kind of artist statements around an artist making X, etc., it's really difficult for me to pinpoint why that is, because it can depend on some of these contracts that artists are supposed to end up having with their publisher or with their record company. But then the second part is, how is it that Spotify can say, on the one hand, that we are paying out more and more back to the music industry is growing, more artists are benefiting from it, but yet anecdotally, you're hearing from artists how they are unhappy about the payouts they're getting from streaming. How could those two things be true? Well, the paradox is they can be true at the same time. It is true that Spotify is paying out more and more each year. And it is also equally true that more artists than ever is benefiting from that payouts. So there are more and more artists that can live off of music, which is amazing. But at the same time, that more and more artists are trying to make it in music. So how should we think about this? Well, the best analogy that I would have is that the music industry is a very, very difficult industry to make it in, kind of similar like professional sports. So if you take football, it's played by hundreds of millions of people around the world, but yet there's a very, very small number of people that can live off of playing soccer full time. FIFA tells us that there's...
They gonna tell you anything. They gonna tell you anything to keep your money. Who the hell, what team of people, what team of adults sat around and said, I got something. This is like football. He's on to something. Let's say. He essentially is saying that not all musicians will turn a profit. That's not new news. Music making is a rewarding hobby for many who accept that they'll never reach superstar status. That's been true for as long as people have been paid to write and perform music. That is the obvious. But by comparing music making to professional football, Ek has presented a flawed analogy that hobbyists and professionals alike are queuing up to correct in the most robust terms. Why? Because the statement leans harder into competitive tech bro mindset than it is into the core values shared by most artists. The music industry might be competitive, but art should not be a competition. Talk about it, Sam.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
The biggest flaw, one of the biggest flaws when people compare music or the music business to professional sports is that professional sports requires a vetting process. You can't just show up and sit next to LeBron on the Lakers bench and say, hey, tell Darvin Ham, tell him I'm in the next 5 minutes. D'Lo's tired. I got it. No, there's a vetting process. There is steps to get to where you get to. But because that does not exist, it does present an issue for platforms like this that are trying to figure out or say they're trying to figure out fair ways to compensate those who deserve it. But my thing is this. If the same platforms make it available that you, out of nowhere, you could just start tomorrow, right? Maybe you've got a large fan base on YouTube or a large fan base on Kick or on Twitch because of your gaming. You tomorrow can put out a song, never made a song a day in your life. And because of the amount of traffic you can generate, you as an amateur can now access the same amount of money for 500,000 streams, 600, 700,000, 2 million streams as somebody who's been doing it 10 years more than you, 20 years more than you. Not to say that they're better, but you're talking about somebody who may be aligned better with the term professional. So to compare this to sports is just disingenuous. The writer says, let's humor this analogy for a moment. There may well be 100,000 professional football players, but the average player in the lowest UK professional division reportedly earns €750 a week, or 39,000 euros a year, before any potential sponsorship deals. Meanwhile, on Spotify in 2023, there were around 200,000 professional or professionally aspiring artists. And in 2022, the top 50,000 artists on the platform earned $12,584.
Somebody's gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
You're in poverty, my brother in Christ. The true aggravation for musicians, though, is that X's statement follows other claims and blunders that seem to further distance him from the platform's musicians. Probably because he's not a musician. Let me hear I want to hear your struggle rap story, Daniel Egg. What is your struggle rap story? Notably in 2023, a few years after claiming that fast-produced albums will trump thoughtful, considered albums made over several years. Did you hear that? Of course, the guy that owns the platform would say some shit like this. Let me go back to this. He said this during a pandemic. Oh, that's nasty ass work. Spotify CEO says it's not enough for artists to release albums every 3 to 4 years. Yeah, because that doesn't support your business goals with Spotify. Fam, come get your boy. Music creators are worried that Spotify is preparing us for AI-generated music to infiltrate our libraries where mood playlists aren't made by a collection of lo-fi hip-hop makers and ambient artists, but by algorithms that are trained on these genres. And Spotify might not be thinking of doing that, but you can't help but feel that's where we're heading. Sam says, it feels like Spotify cares about audio, but not about music. I have doubts that Ek and Spotify's employees are avid music listeners and find deep value in sonic art. I'm sure that Ek's dream is for all artists to be paid better for their artistic efforts. But the streaming model has changed the way artists are expected to release music, and Spotify's pivot to podcasts and audiobooks felt like a kick in the teeth for artists without whom Spotify wouldn't exist. Talk about it.
Nah, and I'm still not content till I'm dominating every single continent. My shit go stupid, you don't think, then use your common sense. I DIY and I know that I'm a product.
When they play the new king, all the DIYs go crazy. All the DIYs go crazy. When they play the new king, all the DIYs go crazy. All the DIYs go crazy.
If this is a game that they're trying to basically gatekeep for what they consider professionals, only professionals, and professionals should get paid. But what happens when professional songwriters are saying things like this? You're getting ready to watch a clip here on Instagram from a well-accomplished singer-songwriter named Mooney Long.
Artists get beat up a lot. Like, for example, California King Bed. Through that song, Ree was able to get an endorsement with Nivea, a very lucrative one, to where she could go on tour and have all these things. And I don't know the intricacies of her business.
So to give a little context, she's talking about songs that she contributes to as a songwriter, specifically this one with Rihanna. Although she gets credited and you would assume paid, there's more detail she gives in this about that, for the actual portion that she contributed to, there's other streams of revenue that she won't get a cut of, even though the music is what inspired the sponsorships and the new money that comes into the picture.
It's not, misconstrue that, but a very small portion of that actually makes it to the songwriters, all these business people involved who get a piece, and then you have your co-writers and your producers and all these things like that. Sometimes they don't feed you. You in this room for 8 hours, you hungry.
That's crazy.
I used to take toilet paper from the studio because I didn't have no money.
Listen, but you do what you gotta do.
No, literally, I used to empty the fruit bowl in my backpack. And then the money part, because like, a lot of people be like, you know, songwriting, you make so much money. You gotta understand there is a pipeline. So I might write a song today and I won't see $1 for 2 years.
Sheesh.
So what job do you know that you work on spec like that for that long? Imagine going to work and you don't get your first check 2 years after your first day. That's crazy. You gotta have a certain level of cray-cray to get up and
mental
keep
fortitude.
doing that. Honestly, like the stuff that I went through as a songwriter, and I'm on the high side of the spectrum where I'm getting cuts. I have people who know my track record and I'm still getting murderized.
Right.
You know?
If it's happening to the tops,
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
you should pay attention. In addition to that, I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about making a defense, which is getting more and more challenging by the day, when they're making a defense for streaming and how, oh, you guys should stop complaining about this. It's not about that. Like, you need to work harder. You need to figure it out. You notice how the people who stream the most or the people who combat this the most are generally, to me, they fall into a few different categories. People who got insanely lucky. They're part of a very small percentage, maybe even less than 1%. Or it's people who have teams. But even in a scenario of people who have teams, we're not accounting for the fact that these payouts that does make it to them goes to multiple people, right? When you have somebody that is able to market their music and broadcast it to all these different platforms, that shit costs money. That's money that someone that is investing into that is expecting to get back at some level. So these are things that are not always being acknowledged. They got you playing a game that you don't have to play. And if you know better, if you know how to sell, the idea of going direct to consumer should not be daunting. If you're someone who's like, I need a fan, I need fans, I need a following in order to, no. You may need that to become successful at it. You don't need that to start. I want to draw your attention to 2 clips, one of which from big band great Artie Shaw, who has a really interesting way of looking at where our responsibility starts and stops as artists in a studio and where it begins for our fans. Listen to what he said really quick.
Said that often the way you find your voice or your thumbprint is by accident.
That's not an accident. That's by design.
That's
the
by
tune
design.
that happens to that you make the tune that happens to be the great big hit that supports you the rest of your life. That's accident. It's freaky. You don't know what's going to hit the public. I can't tell you right now why Fantasy is a big hit. You don't know what's going to be the hit, and you hope, you think it's maybe this will work, but musically, yes, it works subjectively.
Yes.
Objectively, what it does out there in the marketplace, how do you know? How would anybody know McDonald's would sell 5 zillion hamburgers? It's not much different from any other hamburger.
Somebody gonna have to tell the truth, and I'm gonna tell it.
So many specialists are out there telling folks like myself what you can or can't do without streaming. I'm sorry, but your perspective is a little bit biased because you never did it. You never even tried. Imagine telling a young McDonald's business, we're going to sell 1 billion burgers. Yeah, sure you are. Everybody says that around here. But when you look at it, you realize that they're more in the real estate business than they are in the hamburger business. But they still had no idea that the model would work until it worked. So as you see artists like Kanye West, as you see artists like myself, not comparing myself to Kanye, but I'm telling you that was early as shit. When you see the Ryan Leslie's years and years ago and the Princes that inspired them, the Nipseys, the folks that are now in this modern sense, figuring out ways to evolve this game. Not only should you pay attention, you should allow time, a little bit of time, to reveal itself. Because there's things that we're all learning in real time that will be able to come back to you with information that is backed by facts and not theories from people who have never even tried. Let me let them finish this out.
Just shrewd merchandising? I don't know what. He wouldn't be able to tell you. And anybody starts to tell you that he knows what happened, don't listen to that man. listen to a guy who says, I don't know. I'll try. I'll keep trying.
Come on, Artie.
And I hope one of them will sell.
Yeah.
I hope one of my products will sell. You can't know.
You can't know. Can we navigate over here to this other clip, too, of a young Jay-Z, or younger Jay-Z, talking about those early days at Rockefeller? Listen to him talk about the early days, and I want you to think about possibly your new early days as you consider going direct-to-consumer independent artists.
The hardships and all the things that, you have to go through to get to this point. People think you just wake up as soon as you get a deal, or as soon as you put out a record that you're just successful. That's the biggest myth. You started out real small, going to the store. I was going to the store myself and dropping $200, $300 worth of records there, even on consignment. Come back my little $300 and put it there again. Like, we literally was driving our cars going around. Dane would hit the Bronx and Harlem. You know what I mean? I was hitting Brooklyn and Queens. And we just took it from there.
DIYers, it is all a process. Shout out to Congress. Shout out to the representative, Rashida Tlaib and Jamal Bowman. I think that it still requires a lot of guts to put yourself out there on the line for this age of artists and producers that seem in a lot of ways to be getting disrespected, one, by themselves for people who are still caping for these streaming platforms, two, by the supposed fans that I'll just categorize as consumers. It is not an easy stance to take to come to the defense or to say, hey, let's figure out how to make this thing a little bit more fair. I have my concerns though, right? Even if the bill passes and it gets to a cent, because I saw the way these people acted to protect that fraction of a penny. And although I know that they're in a business and they're trying to flip a profit, I understand that 70% of their income is accounted for by the oligarchs, by the Warner Brothers, Sony Music, and UMG. I understand that it's probably going to get even more challenging, but they're not making it easy when your CEO is making these dumbass analogies about why you're not paying the people that are part of the foundation. Don't give all the credit to just the Taylor Swifts and just the Drakes and just the Adeles, because if it was all them, you wouldn't have had a necessity to make it available to other artists who are amateurs to be able to upload their music. I think it's really ridiculous that in the midst of all of this conversation about music not being worth anything, when was the last time you saw the price of that microphone that you want to purchase, independent artists, go down? When was the last time you saw the price of a preamp go down? When was the last time you walked into Guitar Center and they said, hey, you need monitors? Hey, take it. Man, music is free these days. Just take it, man. These things still cost money. Studio time still costs money. Regardless of what Congress does, my big picture, my big takeaway is this, DIYers. Whether they decide a cent, whether they decide $1, pay attention to what the ripple effect is going to be after. Maybe subscriptions go up to $20, $30 a month. What does that solve for you? You know, when I first took my music off of streaming, it wasn't a conversation about demanding that they pay me more. It was just that I knew what my worth was, and I knew that that was the inappropriate pricing model for my music. That's your business. That's your house. Hey, can't tell you the rules in your house. However, on my website, I'll determine that. I'm asking DIYers that you do everything in your ability to not only continue to develop your website, but learn everything you can about serving your customers directly. Because the lessons that you will learn in selling are transferable in the event that you choose to do music or not. You can take those everywhere you go. Think about this for a second. I'll end here. It is a fight at the level of Congress to push your payment to a cent. Your success is in your hands, DIYers, but those are my thoughts. You tell me what you think. DIYers, if you enjoyed this content, make sure that you hit the like button and maybe even consider subscribing. Come on, man. Stop being greedy. Peace.